So welcome everyone to Buddha's Center. My name's Jeff Allen, all of you know, and tonight we'll be going over Bodhicitta, once again, according to Panchen Sonam Dragpa's general meaning of perfection. We've had a couple of classes on it so far and gone over kind of the course outline. But this evening, we're not only going to go over Bodhicitta, but also do some special prayers and specifically the 10th chapter of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life for Khyongla Rato Rinpoche and Geshe Nikki. Khyongla Rato Rinpoche was a very, very important figure in Tibetan Buddhism and very important in disseminating the teachings into the West. Many of his students had a lot of influence and had the ability to make a lot of large things happen for the Dharma. And we're just all, when I think of his kindness and, you know, I was fortunate enough to receive some teachings from Rinpoche in New York City at the Tibet Center. It just really makes my heart feel very warm. And everyone who knew Khyongla Rato Rinpoche feels the same way. He was just such a kind, wonderful person. Geshe Nikki, one of his root students, is now the abbot, the first Western abbot of a major monastery of Drepung Rato. And then you see his other students, such as Richard Gere and Adam Yauk, and all the amazing things that they were able to do in the world, and all of the other students who were great scholars and so forth. So Drepung Rato is a division of Drepung, just like Drepung Gomang and Drepung Losaling. There are many more divisions of Drepung before 1959, before the invasion, the Mao invasion. And Rato was a very important division of Drepung. And, you know, it took them a little bit longer to reestablish themselves as an independent monastery than Losaling or Gomang. But they really were able to do so. And with Khyongla Rato Rinpoche's hard work and Geshe Nikki's hard work and so many other devoted students of them's hard work, now Rato stands on its own as its kind of independent monastery once again. So Rinpoche, our Rinpoche, Khyentse Geshe Wandak, was very, very fond of Khyongla Rato Rinpoche, very, very fond. He always said, what a great scholar, just an incredible scholar. And very fond of Nikki, Geshe Nikki Ken Rato Rinpoche. He used to call him Tupten. And was so happy to find out that he became the abbot of the monastery. And Geshe Nikki Ken Rinpoche was, among other students, with Khyongla Rato, I think, for 40 years or more. And he always followed everything that Khyongla Rato Rinpoche said. And he's just a shining example of Guru devotion. So when I say we say prayers for Khyongla Rato Rinpoche tonight, and we read the 10th chapter of the Bodhicitta Avatara, I also say we say prayers for Geshe Nikki and all of Khyongla Rato's students. But Geshe Nikki really, really, over these years, has just played such an important role in the forming of Rato Monastery. Now he's the abbot, and now he has a huge load to carry now that Khyongla's passed, and he's spent, you know, 2/3 of his life, right, with Khyongla Rato Rinpoche. And I know what that's like, having spent half my life with Khyentse Geshe Wandak, how it felt when he passed. Geshe Nikki's much more mature than I am. You know, he's, you know, I don't know how much older, maybe 20 years older or something, 18 years older than I am, and a much more advanced practitioner. But that still doesn't remove the human element and sadness. So if we could keep him also in our prayers, and other students like Anthony or Tony at the Tibet Center, and, you know, many, many students who were with Khyongla Rato Rinpoche for, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, because Rinpoche had such an impact in the US. So let's just get started with a little bit of motivation. I just wanted to tell you kind of about tonight's events. Let's try to first get our body into in kind of an intentional form in order to just kind of set up our minds that we're and bodies and head them kind of towards the goal of becoming enlightened. And it's almost like kind of intentional way of positioning our body that has some really, really important benefits now and later on, because we are intending to complete this process. We're intending to become Buddhas. So if we can intentionally get into a posture that will be necessary later on at the higher stages, these postures for alignment and so forth will be necessary for us at the higher stages. Let's set that physical intention now, so that we're doing everything that we're doing physically and mentally at this moment in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So it's even we're making our body form in a certain way so that we can become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And I think it's a nice way to start everything, so that it becomes very intentional, and we really know why we're here, and it leaves those imprints for what we'll need later on. So first, we'll start with that 7-point Vairocana posture we've gone over many times. We put our legs into the Vajra, half lotus, cross-legged or sitting posture with our feet on the floor, whatever we can do within our capacity. We put our hands with our right on our left with our thumbs touching. We have our back very straight like a stack of coins, and our shoulder in a very comfortable position, but allowing for our elbows to kind of be out like a bow, it says. And you see in Marpa's posture, very much so, you see that bowed posture when he sits. So Marpa sat with his hands on his thighs, but you saw that very bowed posture. So if you sit with your hands in this gesture of union of method and wisdom with the right on the left with the thumbs touching, try to still have that bowed posture if you can. So your shoulders are in that comfortable position, head slightly down, making for 5, eyes slightly open, glancing at the nose, 6, and then your mouth in a comfortable position with your tongue right behind the teeth at the top of the mouth. But just in a comfortable position, and try to breathe through your nose if you can. That's the most ideal positioning for the breath. And that way in the future, when we're doing Tonglen, we'll have set up our breathing comfort level and kind of our connection to breathing in that fashion already. So we'll have that foundation. So those physical parts, postures were the 7, and then we can say 8, making the last division to breaths. So we breathe in a very normal fashion, not too slow, so we feel like almost like we're suffocating, but not so fast that we're just, filling our lungs very quickly. We want it to be a very, very even type of breathing that takes place, that we feel gently going through our nostrils, not too quickly, but not too slowly, filling up our lungs, filling up our diaphragm, and then we exhale. And we really try to focus solely on the breath, and then maybe including the counting of the breath. So as we exhale, we can count 1, and then we get to the next inhale. As we exhale, we count 2. And we really try to see that we're only focusing on that breath and the counting of the numbers. And that will get us to a more realistic place to be able to set our motivations properly, to go forward with this teaching on bodhicitta. So let's take a minute or so just to do some breathing in and out and counting the breath, and just seeing how focused we can get our mind just on the breath and just on that counting, and try and leave everything else, as a good friend says, in the parking lot. That today's events, tomorrow's events, all the things that are the 8 worldly dharmas, all the activities that we have to do, which aren't causes for becoming a Buddha. Let's kind of leave all of those activities and options outside somewhere else, and try to just get our minds to a more reasonable state, focused on the breath, from where we can grow a wonderful, beautiful motivation to do this for everyone. So let's begin doing the breathing. Now let's set our motivation. Begin to think about the various sufferings that you have to endure. Think about the suffering, suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering, suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, suffering of sickness, suffering of death, the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, the suffering of being separated from what is pleasant, the suffering of not getting what you want, and then finally the suffering of being thrust over and over and over again into a set of aggregates beyond your control. And these aggregates are the basis for all of these sufferings that just were mentioned. Recognize that all sentient beings have these same sufferings. Think about the sufferings that we see in the world right now going on, the shootings that just happened. In school. The war in Ukraine. People being bullied, people starving. Animals being used and harmed. Sentient beings in realms that we can't even imagine. Having sufferings we can't even imagine. And we think how nice it would be if they could have happiness. We think how nice it would be if they could be free from suffering. We make a commitment to do something about it and recognize that the only being that can truly, truly help all sentient beings is the Buddha. And this kind of forces us in our mind, because of logic, to want to become a Buddha, so that we can bring all of those sentient beings who are suffering, including ourselves, to a state of happiness that is free from suffering. So it's this motivation that we have for attending this teaching tonight on bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is a desire to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings, for the sake of others. So it's for that reason that we're attending this teaching, to become Buddhas for the sake of others, for the sake of all sentient beings, so that we can bring them to a state of Buddhahood. It's that motivation for everyone else, to help everyone, to put others' needs before our own, to take our self-cherishing attitude and exchange it and turn it into an attitude that cherishes others. It's for that reason that we're attending this teaching, that we're listening to the Heart Sutra and reciting the Heart Sutra, that we're making a mandala offering and a request for a teaching, all the way from the teacher that's teaching and saying the words that are going into your ears, all the way back to the Buddha, when we look at it in terms of lineage. When we make the refuge prayer, we're going for refuge for the sake of all sentient beings, so that we can become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. We see that within the refuge prayer. Through practicing giving and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Right in the refuge prayer, we see that. Bodhicitta, the idea of bodhicitta. So it's with those motivations we begin with the Heart Sutra. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Agasamara Tajandara Samara Yambe, Deata Om, Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangati Buddhiso, Baba Concha Sanjika Yidimidoji, Lavadaji, Mivadaji, Shavadaji, Jagi Baji Medavijadanji, Jedingo Yeso, Kirin Don Jaji Shiva, Don Mito Nubejan Don Java, Don Bajun Jim Bonzon Zon Joji, Raji De Jan Denda De Le. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas High, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Randa Mandala Gamni Ratayami Danye Jadanda Ye Janala Yanjo Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jiji Jibe Sonanji Jola Benje Zanje Juba Jo Zanje Jadan Zaji Janala Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jeje Jibe Zonanje Jola Benje Zanje Juba Jo Zanje Jadan Zaji Janala Yanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Junye Jibe Zonanje Jola Benje Zanje Juba Jo. So good to see all of you again. So we'll get started here with Bodhicitta Semke, mind generation or awakening mind. We've gone over this for a couple of weeks now, and we're looking at Panchen Sonam Dragpa's general meaning of perfection. And in the section on Semke, on mind generation, we find there are 5 categories that Panchen Sonam Dragpa divides Semke into in order to explain it. And this gives us a really amazing understanding of what bodhicitta is and isn't, who can get it, who can't get it, how do you get it, and so forth. So it's really, really an amazing summarized presentation that allows for so much commentary on that summary. If you look at the Lam Rim, and you look at the Abhisama Alamkara, perfection of wisdom teachings and so forth, in some of the greater ways, and even sections of Panchen Sonam Dragpa's general meaning of perfection, in order to understand some of the words that are in here, which we did last week. We looked at this word conqueror, we looked at this word Buddha, and we tried to figure out what a Buddha is, who a Buddha is, and so forth. And we utilized the last section of the general meaning of perfection that went into the 4 bodies of the Buddha and the definitions and so forth in order to explain this one, sentence that we find in the various divisions and so forth that we'll get to in this section on Semke, or mind generation, and Panchen Sonam Dragpa's general meaning of perfection. So we're really, really going to go slowly with this. We're going to look at words. We're going to look at meanings of words and try to develop a better understanding of bodhicitta by the end of this. And all of this, it's really, really improving my understanding of it as well by having to explain it and working with Geshe Aga in India and asking a lot of questions that I hadn't, necessarily asked before, because I hadn't had to think about it in terms of presenting it as a teaching. And when you have to think of presenting something as a teaching, it makes you start to analyze things even more, just to make sure that you don't present anything incorrectly. So I really appreciated that part of the process, just checking all of the things that I think I know to make sure I know them, and checking them against another scholar while using the textbook and other great works to kind of fill in some of the details to reassure me that what I thought I heard, right? Because we have the wisdom arisen from hearing, that what I thought I heard was correct. So it's been a wonderful process so far. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you to Khensa Geshe Wandak for instilling a little bit of, instilling a lot of wisdom in me. Somewhere in there's imprints of it, and the more I can ripen those imprints into understandings, the better, because we all heard all of these teachings for so many years, so they went in our ears. Rinpoche, from a hearing perspective, we were there, we heard them go into our ears, and then our mind kind of sorted them out or didn't sort them out, but they, these words we've heard have left imprints that will ripen later on into more understanding. It's just the nature of cause and effect, that the result will be concordant with the cause. So when we understand something later, it's because we heard it before. What we're doing now is creating a basis for a later understanding, even if it's just the words that we're hearing and not necessarily understanding the words in full meaning. We see even in the story of Basu Bandhu's pigeon, who sat outside of his window and was able to leave imprints of the baskets, only 2 of the baskets, when we look at the 3 baskets, but the Abhidharma Sutra and Vinaya basket. But we see that those imprints in his next life ripened into his ability to be a greater scholar than Basu Bandhu was. He became Basu Bandhu's student and a greater scholar as a result of sitting outside of a window, being a pigeon, and hearing Basu Bandhu reciting the baskets of Dharma. So if Basu Bandhu's pigeon can acquire some sort of imprints, and then those imprints ripen into realization later and understanding later, then we can certainly do the same thing as a human being who then can understand in our language the words that are coming in our ears. So just a really, really amazing opportunity that we have here to be able to become bodhisattvas because of what we're hearing today, if we aren't already bodhisattvas. So this will be one of the reasons we become bodhisattvas. There couldn't be any other way we could become bodhisattvas than hearing about how to become bodhisattvas and what bodhisattvas are and so forth. There wouldn't be another way that we could become a bodhisattva. It would have to go through stages in that manner. If we wanted to become an English teacher, it would have to start somewhere, right? Where we were first learning the English language, and then going through various stages of learning how to teach and so forth. So it didn't start, someone wasn't able to become an English teacher out of womb. There were various stages and processes that were required to make such a position possible. Likewise, if one wants to become a Buddha, a little bit harder position to acquire. If you look at the stages necessary and, look at the Buddha becoming a bodhisattva and then it taking 3 countless eons from there, a little bit more work maybe, but same thing, right? You have to first, learn the very, very basics, understand what it would be, to understand what the language is. If you want to be an English teacher, you have to understand what language is. You have to understand specifically what English language is separated from, Spanish language. You have to be able to isolate, that thing you're trying to learn specifically, and then learn the various stages that are required in order to achieve that result. So the Buddhahood is the same way, and the cause, of the Buddha is the Bodhisattva. We see in Chandrakirti's text and in the sutras, and we see that the cause of the Bodhisattva is great compassion, and everything either arises from great compassion in terms of pathway, or great compassion is a result of it. We see when we look at great compassion in terms of the 7-point cause and effect, we see it, kind of in the middle there, where we recognize that sentient beings are our mothers, are our kin, our fathers, are, closest beings we could imagine to us. We remember their kindness, wish to repay their kindness, generate love through the force of attraction. This love then turns into compassion. So love is the actual cause of compassion. If we look at, the 7-point cause and effect, love, the wish for sentient beings to have happiness and its causes gives rise to a wish that they be free from suffering, and the causes of suffering. We see that love gives rise to that compassion, but then that compassion compels us to want to do something about these sentient beings that are suffering. And we get to the stage called the extraordinary attitude, which then causes bodhicitta, this thing we're speaking of. It's one of the, causes among the 2, one being equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, this one being called the 7-point cause and effect for realizing bodhicitta. So we see how this compassion, drives the ability for one to become a bodhisattva, and then the bodhisattva is what that bodhisattva path is what gives rise to the actual state of Buddhahood. So if one wants to become a Buddha, it's necessary to have bodhicitta. It's indispensable. When we look at the union of method and wisdom, when we look at method and wisdom as these two things that are necessary on the path. We look at in terms of the Sutrayana, the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom that's necessary. The bodhicitta and compassion, these things fall into the accumulation of merit. And without that accumulation of merit, without the love and compassion and bodhicitta, one isn't able to achieve Buddhahood. One would only be able to achieve, the lesser vehicle or nirvana, an abiding nirvana, where one still had obstructions to omniscience, because it says, in even Kamalashila's stages of meditation, it talks about, that if one doesn't have this method side of the path, then it's like bondage. It compares it to, being jailed by this, because one would never be able to become a Buddha without this method side, without bodhicitta, without this entrance into the Mahayana, which is, again, bodhicitta. So we divide it into 5 categories according to this explanation: base, cause, nature, division, and benefit. So far, we've only gone over physical base, which we learned in terms of aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. The very beginning of the general meaning of perfection, we find these categories, and then it says that there is aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. Aspiring bodhicitta is a desire to become a Buddha for the sake of others, for the sake of sentient beings. Engaged bodhicitta is that mind that is coupled with a bodhisattva vow. So Kamalashila's stages of meditation, again, differentiates aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta in that way, by saying that once there's the presence of the vow, this becomes engaged bodhicitta, and that engaged bodhicitta will make that bodhisattva remain an engaged bodhisattva, or a bodhisattva with an engaged bodhicitta from then on, when they, of course, are cognizing. There's this debate, right? When the bodhisattva is having a direct perception of emptiness, do they have bodhicitta, right? So you would say no. There's not that mind at that point. Big debate. We'll leave it at that. Leave it for you to look into. But there's this idea when we have this ultimate bodhicitta, which is the bodhicitta that is at the path of seeing. When someone's seeing emptiness directly, they have this thing called ultimate bodhicitta, but it's not bodhicitta. It's just called that. So we'll leave that there, and we'll move back to where we were, to these 2 types of bodhicitta. I like to leave little things out there. You're welcome to look further into that, but that's a real serious point that's made. That ultimate bodhicitta is not bodhicitta, because the direct valid cognition of emptiness is not conceptual. It's just there's no conceptuality there. It's a direct perception of one thing, and that's the lack of inherent existence. It's the nature of reality. While you're cognizing only that, you're still a bodhisattva. And I asked Geshe Aga, I'm going to go a little further into this. I asked Geshe Aga, I said, well, how is this, true? So are you telling me that when the bodhisattva is seeing emptiness, they're not a bodhisattva? Because, you have to have bodhicitta to be a bodhisattva. And he said, well, when you're asleep, are you blind? So it was very interesting. When you're sleeping, you're not having visual consciousness, but you're not seeing something with your eye consciousness, right? But it doesn't mean that you're blind. It just means that isn't in operation at that time. So Interesting, right? So we have these two kinds of bodhicitta. When we look at it in these two ways, we're not talking at this point about conventional and ultimate bodhicitta. That'll come later on in explaining. I just gave you a little taste of that. But here we're just talking about aspirational bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. So the first category is base. What's the physical base? What kind of physical base does a being need in order to get aspirational bodhicitta? We learn that any among the 6 realms of cyclic existence serve as a physical base for aspirational bodhicitta. And then we learn that it's really the higher realms of cyclic existence that serve as a physical base for engaged bodhicitta, for the new arisal of this engaged bodhicitta. So not meaning, someone who's a bodhisattva who could emanate, who has engaged bodhicitta, meaning this new arisal. Where could someone take a bodhisattva vow, right? Where could someone become an engaged bodhisattva? And it's in this case, the physical basis, really narrow it down to the higher realms. And there's, debate within all of this, right? But where we narrow it down within Panchen Sonam Dragpa's text is that we find that in the, human realms and the desire realm gods and some of the form realm gods, we find this ability to take the bodhisattva vow. And then we learn that the best possible physical basis for achieving the bodhisattva vow would be a fully ordained person, monk or nun. But, Lord Atisha says that, the main category for best basis is anyone who holds the 7 types of individual liberation vows, the pradamoksha vows. But the best among those being the fully ordained practitioner. So we learn that about the best, physical basis and the possible physical bases for aspiring and engaged bodhicitta. So next category, we get into mental base. So mental base, now we're talking about aspiring bodhicitta. Mental base has 4 categories. Faith, focused on the conqueror. Compassion, which is focused on sentient beings. Perseverance, that's willing to endure the hardships of a bodhisattva, conqueror's child. And then general, just faith, the word faith. Last week, we looked at this first category, faith, which observes or is focused on the conqueror. And we talked about who is the conqueror, who is Buddha. What is the etymology of the word sangye, depending on which dialect you use, right? Sang meaning to wake up, and je meaning to open in a sense. And we learn that when you look at the meaning of this, based on the Golden Rosary, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the Abhisama Alamkara and the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, we find that, what is the Buddha woken up from? The Buddha has woken up from the sleep of ignorance. And this J word, open, meaning woken up, omniscient, open, like the lotus opening. So these 2 parts that the Buddha is woken up open, woken up all knowing. So the Sangye, etymology we can say is this, someone who's woken up from the sleep of ignorance. And what is ignorance? What is the sleep of ignorance? Ultimately, it's the grasping at things as being truly established. So the Buddha no longer does that. So the Buddha is woken up from that misapprehension. And the Buddha no longer has any self-cherishing whatsoever and had engaged in all of the bodhisattva paths. So he or she no longer has afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience. So therefore, they are je, they are omniscient, they are open. So they've woken up from the sleep of ignorance, but this extra part shows you this, what they've woken up into. They're now omniscient. And it's this special thing. You may be able to say that a Hinayana foe destroyer, right? A hero or a solitary realizer, have they woken up from the sleep of ignorance? One that's, I'm sure, a huge debate, right? So what differentiates their awakening from the sleep of ignorance versus a Buddha's awakening from the sleep of ignorance? And we can see the distinction between a hearer nirvana and the Buddha's enlightenment, a hearer's or a solitary realizer's enlightenment, or a Buddha's enlightenment. The difference is that the hearer and solitary realizer doesn't have this omniscience part, doesn't have this open part. One may be able to argue there's this part where they've woken up from ignorance, but they don't have omniscience because they've only practiced a limited pathway, which only brings about limited results. And those limited results that are brought about in this case are just the removal of the afflictive obstructions and not the obstructions to omniscience. It's the Bodhisattva path that allows the being to remove the obstructions to omniscience. So very interesting. It's necessary to remove all forms of self-cherishing in order to get rid of those obstructions to omniscience, in order to have that openness, in order to be omniscient. So it's very, very interesting when you start to, what's the difference between the hearer, solitary realizers, enlightenment and a Buddha's enlightenment? What's the difference? They both have this word enlightenment. What differentiates the two? What differentiates the two is that the hearers and solitary realizers enlightenment have what's called an abiding nirvana, and they still have obstructions to omniscience. They are not omniscient, and they still have to go through the Mahayana path in order to become omniscient, even though they are no longer in cyclic existence. They are in nirvana, they've achieved an abiding nirvana, but they're still haven't fulfilled all of their own needs, let alone others, all sentient beings' needs, because they have these obstructions to omniscience, these imprints that are left over from the ignorance, these subtle imprints that are left over that can only be gotten rid of with the Bodhisattva path and getting rid of the self-cherishing attitude. So we learned all about what a conqueror is. We learned about the four bodies of the Buddha, the truth body having the wisdom truth body and the natural truth body, those being two of the four bodies. We learned about the enjoyment body, that beautiful body of the Buddha, and then we learned about the emanation body, the body that we could all see if we were so lucky, to come in contact with, and also that we do come in contact with and don't even know it because of our karma. So be so wonderful to always know when an emanation is an emanation, right? Working for our sake. And as we get more and more advanced, we'll be able to recognize these things more clearly. We'll be able to see a Buddha in the room when we make a supplication to the Buddha. The Buddha always comes. The Buddha's omniscient. We just called them, but we don't have the karma to necessarily see their presence. But as we become more and more realized and get rid of more and more of obscurations, we have the ability to cognize these things that we can't at this point because of our ignorance, because of these veils that we have over our understanding. So this first faith which observes or is focused on the conqueror is a necessary mental base. If you want to become a Buddha, you have to know what a Buddha is. I mean, it's so obvious. And if you want to become a Buddha, more than anything else, you would have developed faith, right? So one of the prerequisites for your mind, this fertile ground of your mind that will allow for bodhicitta to grow. This is what Geshe-Aga explained it, like this mental base is like this fertile ground, and in order for a seed to grow, you need various things. You need water and sunlight. The ground can't be frozen. There needs to be all of these varying things. And the mental base at this point has these is saturated with these things that allow for the mind to serve as a base for the arisal of, in this case, aspirational bodhicitta. So you need to have faith focused on the Buddha. So we learn about faith in the Buddha right at the beginning, right? When we go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we establish why the Buddha is an appropriate object of our faith, why the Buddha is an appropriate object of refuge. When we study the Lam Rim, we find that the Buddha has these excellent qualities of body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities, and so forth. So we learn about this right in the beginning of the Lam Rim, well before we get into the great vehicle, before we get into anything about bodhicitta. We learn about this in the very beginning stages of the small scope. We learn what the conqueror is, what the Buddha is, and why we would have faith in him or her. So we can't kind of skip ahead, if you will. We always have to have the prior realizations that serve as a foundation. And you see it right here in the Bodhicitta class. You see the small scope serves as a mental base, small scope realization of refuge, and other points in here, right? But the small scope realization of refuge serves as a mental base for getting aspirational bodhicitta. It's so clear right here. Faith which is focused on the conqueror. So very interesting. Second, compassion focused on sentient beings. So compassion, what did we just learn? We learned that compassion is a result. Bodhicitta is a result of compassion, but compassion is a result. Compassion is caused by love. Love is, if we look at it in terms of the 7-point cause and effect, love is caused by wishing to repay the kindness of sentient beings. Wishing to repay the kindness of sentient beings comes from remembering their kindness. Remembering their kindness requires us to remember who they were that was kind to us. But in order for us to remember that and to kind of think of all sentient beings in that way, we have to establish equanimity. We have to establish an equal desire to benefit our friends, enemies, and neutrals. But how would we even think to benefit them or know what we were trying to do to benefit them or know what suffering was for them if we didn't know what it was for ourselves? So we have to develop renunciation, a desire to definitely emerge for ourselves if we want to develop bodhicitta. And in order to develop renunciation, we have to understand samsara. We have to understand, cyclic existence and what we're trying to get out of. If we want to develop refuge, the two causes for refuge are fear and faith. In order to develop fear, we have to know what we're afraid of when we look at cyclic existence. We have to know what we want to be free from. What are we afraid of? What don't we want to be afraid of? And then faith. Why is the Buddha an appropriate foundation for refuge? When we look at faith, well, let me go further. So this is the second, is compassion. It's focused on sentient beings. So it's focusing on wanting sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So you have to have this mind that wants sentient beings to be free from suffering and its causes in order to get bodhicitta. Your mind has to be saturated with that. You have to have this mental base. Then you have to have this perseverance that's willing to endure the hardship of a bodhisattva. So, you have to have meditated on the benefits and understand, what you're really getting into, and be willing to endure what's necessary. And this all comes from our understanding and our learning. When we look at perseverance, when in the chapter on in the later sections of the Lam Rim Chenmo, when we look at the causes for perseverance, for instance, it says the three root reasons, or the three roots and the 9 reasons. It's the three root reasons. The death meditation. Death is certain. We don't know when we're going to die, and nothing can help us but Dharma. These 3 roots, they're called the 3 roots and the 9 reasons. So how do we get this perseverance that's willing to endure suffering? we get it by recognizing that, oh my gosh, we don't have much time, and we've got to throw ourselves into Dharma. And then it makes us learn more and more and more about what would be necessary to become a Buddha. And then we're willing to do it. But it starts by understanding that, death will come, nothing can stop it. We don't know when we're going to pass, and nothing can help us but Dharma. And once we understand nothing can help us but Dharma, it gives us that desire to do nothing but Dharma. And it gives us that effort, that perseverance that it's being talked about here, this willingness to endure hardship. When we look at patience, one of the forms of patience is patience willing to endure suffering, and then patience that, is willing to, deal with the hardships of the Dharma, willing to do what it has to take in order to become a Buddha. And then the last category is general faith. So those are 4 categories. So you see, faith is mentioned twice. And I questioned that this morning. And I was correct at my assumption, but I always want to check them. So in this first category, faith which observes or is focused on the conqueror, this specific faith only has as an object of observation the Buddha. So doesn't have the Buddha's teachings, just the Buddha. Like this type of faith is just observing how great the Buddha is, has faith in the Buddha. The last type of faith is all the other types of faith that are related to the Dharma in this case. So for instance, Geshe Aga said, the Dharma jewel, the hearer's path, Bodhicitta. All of these things are examples of objects of observation of faith that aren't objects of observation that are the Buddha, right? They're just different categories. This first category is only faith in the Buddha. The fourth category is referring to other types of faith, faith in bodhicitta, and faith. And when we categorize faith, we generally break it into 3 different categories. And faith falls under the category of a virtuous mental factor. So when we divide, I don't want to go too far into the details, but when we divide mind, I'm just trying to figure out how deep to go into this. Let's do it. When we divide consciousness into categories, we have minds, and then we have mental factors, okay? So the mind is a knower of the entity of the object, okay? The mental factor is a knower which on the basis of observation engages the object from the point of its other features, function, and so forth. So that's just basically the difference between mind and mental factors. Minds are divided into 6, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mental consciousness. So those are your 6 divisions of consciousness, mental consciousness, of physical and mental consciousness. And then when we look at mental factors, it's divided into 51 categories. And we can divide it into 6 if we want to make it kind of more compact: omnipresent mental factors, determining mental factors, virtuous factors, root afflictions, secondary afflictions, and changeable factors. A lot of words, I understand, but we're getting somewhere with this. When we get to that third category, a virtuous factor, the first virtuous factor is faith. So faith has different categories when we look at these texts. And there's a faith of conviction, a wishing faith, and a clarity of faith, or a cleansing faith. Sometimes it's translated as. What does this even mean? So it's important to understand what faith is in terms of what we're talking about, because it doesn't mean we just like something. Because we can, when we look at our things that we like, for instance, if we if we like a child or maybe a spouse or something, or even like Coca-Cola. If we like Coca-Cola, let's use that. Say we like Coca-Cola. We can like that, but that's not faith. The faith becomes a kind of a conviction from the depths of one's heart, like kind of a conviction in something. So you can like Coca-Cola, but you don't necessarily have this faith in it or conviction in it. Likewise, you don't have to like what you have faith in. You can have faith in the law of karma and its results. Right? You can have faith that is true, but that doesn't mean it's something that you like. So faith in these terms isn't something that you like. It's something more. It's belief is another word in Tibetan, but it's something that you. Let's go through the different forms of it, and maybe it'll make sense. So this clarity of faith. This is when, in terms of Buddhism specifically, when you think about the three jewels and you learn about the excellent qualities that the three jewels have, that cleansing of your mind that takes place, like that serves then as the foundation for qualities of realization to be generated. That's considered a type of faith. This clearing your mind of things that aren't things to have faith in, that allows for you to prosper. So it's almost like a cleansing of your mind, this faith that cleanses your mind, in this case, of what direction to go in. And then there's this faith and conviction. So gaining conviction in, for instance, dependent arising or karma and its results through contemplating the doctrines that the Buddha set forth. So you gain this faith in it by contemplating and so forth. Then so that's the second kind of faith, this kind of faith of conviction. So there's this faith of clarity and the faith of conviction. And then there's a third type of faith, which is called like a faith in the result, or what's a better word to say it? The faith which is a wish to attain. I think that's the most literal translation. So the faith which is a wish to attain is a faith that says, oh, I believe Buddhahood's possible. I have faith in that. So it's this, oh, I can do that. I have faith in that. So that faith, which is a wish to attain. So it's not this shaky kind of blind faith at all when we're speaking of faith. It's a faith that's grounded in an understanding. So here, a faith that's grounded in an understanding of what the Buddha is. This first type of faith, when we go back to these different categories and so forth of the mental bases, faith which observes or is focused on the conqueror is a faith which has as the object of observation the Buddha, because of knowing what the Buddha is, right? It's not a blind faith at all. It's being very clear on what the Buddha is, because we know that you establish that in the beginning stages when you go for refuge and you establish the Buddha as an appropriate object of refuge. So we know that we've sorted all of that out by the time we arrive here. And we know that this faith, observed in the conqueror is grounded in a reasoning, is grounded in a point. And then this other kind of faith that we talk about, you arrive at, faith in these other things by analyzing them. But faith in bodhicitta, faith in the Dharma jewel, faith in the cessation of suffering and so forth. So these things come about, this faith comes about through studying, through reasoning, through analysis, through taking one subject. Analysis is taking a subject and looking at it in every different way possible, and then you can arrive at a place where you can have this stable kind of understanding of things, which then can turn into stronger bases. Now, why does it say faith is a necessary basis? Faith is a necessary basis because when we look at determining mental factors, okay, aspiration is one of the first determining mental factors, and faith gives rise to that. Faith gives rise to aspiration. So when we say we aspire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, we see that faith in terms of cause and effect serves as a basis of aspiration. So if we want to become something, we aspire to become a Buddha, we first have faith in the Buddha, right? In the Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, we see right in the very first page, depending on which translation you have, right? First few stanzas, it says, between wisdom and faith, wisdom is chief, but faith is its prerequisite. So Nagarjuna really shows how faith is such an important foundation for achieving wisdom. For achieving the perfection of wisdom, one has to have faith as his basis. So it's indispensable. So please don't ever discard these earlier topics of looking at the excellent qualities of the Buddha and you know how wonderful this being is, because it's from that faith that you can aspire to become a Buddha. And aspiring to become a Buddha is called Bodhicitta. Aspiring to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings, want to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. It becomes that aspiration from faith, which is brought about by reasoning, understanding, and a foundation that's immovable, that's incontrovertible, because you've used reasoning and analysis and haven't just guessed at it. You've hit the target, you know, with the reasoning, and you've landed on something that you can establish that is valid. And that's, you know, just what's the name of the game around here in terms of achieving realizations. And that's the one thing I hope everyone leaves with as we study these texts and we look at logic and we look at how these great pandits, the Indian pandits, and, you know, Tsongkhapa and Gyaltsab and Kirtub, and then, you know, Khenser Geshe Wandak and Khyongla Rato Rinpoche, you know, how they looked at these texts. We see that it required just an in-depth amount of analysis to arrive at the understanding that this point comes from that. From this, there's that, as the Buddha would say. From this comes that. And nothing arises, you know, that's functions without a cause. And when we look at the omniscient mind, that's a functioning thing. And all functioning things have a cause. So we have to create those causes and so forth. And we have to make sure we have the condition, we have the suitable bases in order to make that occur if we want to become a Buddha. So I think that's maybe a good place to stop because we're going to be doing the prayer tonight for Rinpoche. But I just wanted to, you know, go over this first section again. We'll get into number 2 next Thursday, which is cause. And we'll get into the cause, condition, and power. And you'll find all of those points made in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and many other wonderful presentations when it comes down to bodhicitta. So this is a big mind. This isn't something that is acquired very easily. Venerable Thupten Chodron sent me an email the other day that said, bodhicitta, very fun, have fun talking about it. Wonderful to talk about, difficult to get. Love is wonderful to talk about, difficult to get. When we look at immeasurable love, right? When we look at what causes a bodhisattva, it isn't the kind of love we think about when we say love. It's maybe similar to it in some ways, but the love that is achieved at that point is a love that's immeasurable, meaning that all sentient beings that in our little tiny minds we can't measure, only the Buddha can, are objects of our love. There's not one being in existence when we have immeasurable love that isn't an object of may they have happiness and the causes of happiness. When we look at compassion and we look at immeasurable compassion and we look at this idea of wanting, sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, we're speaking of immeasurable sentient beings, immeasurable in our minds. Only a measurement of Buddha can know because it's such a large amount. I have a hard time when I think about who do I love, coming up with, if I just say it real quick and honest, and I'm not trying to be like Captain, Mr. Buddhism, the number is nowhere near, the number of hands and fingers and toes I have, let alone immeasurable in my mind. So we need to get right sized with that. We need to try to expand that if we have any shot. And the way that we expand that is by maturing our mind, by learning these things, by understanding our own suffering, by understanding the Four Noble Truths from our side, by understanding what we would need to do in order to free sentient beings from their suffering. And we're doing a good job at making some headway by attending a class on bodhicitta, and not just a very basic class on bodhicitta, a very, very in-depth class on bodhicitta in terms of classes on bodhicitta you can take, because Panchen Sonam Dragpa elucidates it so clearly. So really rejoice in that and feel wonderful about the fact that you've been able to hear. Think about how many Westerners have heard Panchen Sonam Dragpa's breakdown and outline of bodhicitta from Drepung Losar Ling's textbook, right out of it. Think about that. We're so fortunate because of Khyentse Geshe Wandak's kindness, and because of Khyentse Pema Jetsun's kindness, and Shaku Gen Nima, Khyentse Gen Nima's kindness, and Ling Rinpoche's kindness, and Trijung Rinpoche's kindness, and Uze Lama's kindness, Gen Uze's kindness, and it just so many teachers have been so kind to allow for us to hear these words, and we should always remember that. So now, so Khyongla Rato Rinpoche passed away, passed into nirvana a couple of days ago, 2 days ago, and is this up on? I'm screen sharing already. So I'm screen sharing. I didn't already. The prayer itself that we're going to be doing for Khyongla Rato Rinpoche. He was a great Bodhisattva, Rinpoche was, and so many beings miss him right at this very moment, and feel that sense of loss like we did when Khyentse Geshe Wandak passed, or maybe you do about Khyongla Rinpoche if you knew him. But what an important master in the Gelugpa lineage. And I'm just forever grateful for his kindness and for the Dharma that he brought here, and for his students that have carried the Dharma on. And I'm so grateful for Rato Ken Rinpoche, Geshe Nikki, who's been very, very kind to me. And during this time with Rinpoche, I spoke with him a couple of times, and he gave me some really good advice in terms of how to handle the final days of Rinpoche's life. And he's just been a good friend to me for that. And now he's in the position a few months later that I was in and we were in. He's the one who, when Rinpoche was intubated, I contacted, and he got me to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I will always be forever grateful for that. And I just want to say thank you to Khyongla Rato Rinpoche for being such a wonderful scholar, for producing such wonderful students, and for touching my life. And last night, Anthony, one of Khyongla Rato Rinpoche's root students at the Tibet Center, gave a wonderful memorial for him, and he was saying that, you know, when beings like this leave our world, it really has an impact. It has an impact on the entire world. He said it's like when there's a room full of butter lamps and there's 1,000 butter lamps on, and one goes out. You may not perceive it, you know, like so clearly that one went out, but it's not as bright. It's definitely not as bright. And it's so clear that the world is a little less bright without Khyongla Rato Rinpoche in it. But we have hope, right? Because Khyongla Rato Rinpoche had so many great students, that those great students will shine that light and make up for that absence. And really, I just pray for those students, and pray for all of you, and pray for myself to be able to carry on the work of these giants, to carry on the work of great bodhisattvas. It's very hard work. It takes us to have, you know, faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, faith that observes sentient beings, and observes the conqueror, and faith that has all of these necessary aspects. So let's begin with this prayer. This is from Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Shantideva was a great Indian pandit. He wrote this, the Compendium of Trainings. This is one of the most famous works we find in Buddhism, right? And Shantideva, this was very, very interesting. He, in the monastery, was very secretive about his practices and his studies and so forth. And other monks, you know, kind of teased him and said all he does is kind of eat, sleep, and go to the bathroom. They didn't think he was really realized or knew anything at all. And then one day, to tease him, they set up this really high teaching throne that he couldn't possibly get onto, and said, let's have Shantideva. Let's have this guy who just doesn't do anything, you know, try and get up on this altar, and let's tease him, and let's make him give a Dharma talk because we know he doesn't know anything. And secretly, Shantideva was a great bodhisattva, and studying all of that time and meditating. So when it came time to give the teaching, the throne was too high for him to get onto, but he flew into the air and mounted the throne, and then gave the teaching, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So a little history on where this text comes from. It's almost like a dare. It's almost like someone bullying someone, and then the bullies finding out that that person was really the one that they were supposed to be following the whole time, and was really the realized one. So it's just something that we can take from that. So this is the dedication section. Through the virtue of having composed this work, a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, may all living beings come to engage in Bodhisattva's conduct. May all beings everywhere plagued with sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. For as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may their mundane happiness never decline, and may all of them uninterruptedly receive waves of joy from Bodhisattvas. May all embodied creatures who throughout the universe experience hellish realms come to enjoy the bliss of Sukhavati. May those feeble with cold find warmth, and may those oppressed with heat be cold. By the boundless waters that pour forth from the great clouds of the Bodhisattva's merits, may the forest of razor-sharp leaves become a beautiful pleasure grove, and may the trees of knives and swords grow into wish-fulfilling trees. May the regions of hell become places of joy with vast and fragrant lotus pools, beautified with the exquisite calls of wild ducks, geese, and swans. May the heaps of burning coals change in heaps of jewels. May the burning ground become a polished crystal floor, and may the mountains of crushing hells become celestial palaces of worship filled with sugatas. May the rains of lava, blazing stones, and weapons from now on become a rain of flowers, and may all battling with weapons from now on be a playful exchange of flowers. By the force of my virtue, may those caught in the fury torments of hold on one second, I'm sorry. I can't read this. Hold on one second. Bear with me. Okay. By the force of my virtues, may those caught in the fiery torrents of acid, their flesh eaten away, revealing their lily white bones, obtain the bodies of celestials and dwell with goddesses in gently flowing rivers. Why are the henchmen of Yama, the unbearables, buzzards, unafraid through whose noble strength is joy brought upon us? Hold on one second. Hey, hey, hon. I'm sorry, I can't read the. I apologize. Just give me one moment. I'm not very computer savvy, and the screen of video is cutting half of my text off. So I don't know how to, I could just read it like out of my book, but it's cutting it off, and then I can't scroll. So yeah, if you could scroll. Why are the henchmen of Yama, the unbearable buzzards and vultures afraid, through whose noble strength is joy brought upon us and darkness dispelled? Looking upon, they behold in the firmament the radiant form of Vajrapani. Through the force of their joy, may they be free from evil and find his company. When they see the lava fires of hell extinguished by a rain of falling flowers mixed with scented water, immediately satisfied, they wonder whose work this was. In this way, may those in hell behold Padmapani. Friends, don't be afraid, but quickly gather here. What need is there to flee when above us is the youthful Manjagosha to dispel our fears, the tender Bodhisattva who protects all living beings, through whose might all suffering is removed and the force of joy abounds. Behold him in an enchanting palace, resounding with hymns sung by 1,000 goddesses, with the tiaras of 100 gods being offered to his lotus feet, and a rain of many flowers falling on his head, the eyes of which are moist with kindness. Upon seeing Manjagosha in this way, may those in hell cry out loud with joy. Likewise, having seen, due to the roots of my wholesome deeds, the cool and sweet smelling rain falling from joyful clouds, created by the Bodhisattvas Samantabhadra and Sara Navarana Vikshkambini, may all beings in hell be truly happy. May all animals be free from the fear of being eaten by one another. May the hungry ghosts be as happy as the men of the northern continent. May they be satisfied by a stream of milk pouring from the hand of noble Lord Avalokiteshvara, and by bathing in it, may there always be cooled. May the blind see forms, may the deaf hear sounds. And just as it was with Maya Deva, may pregnant women give birth without pain. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find new hope. May constant happiness and prosperity. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their illness. May every disease in the world never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting one another. May all travelers find happiness everywhere they go, and without any effort, may they accomplish whatever they set out to do. May those who sail in ships and boats obtain whatever they wish for, and having safely returned to shore, may they joyfully reunite with their relatives. May troubled wanderers who have lost their way meet with fellow travelers, and without any fear of thieves and tigers, may their going be easy without any fatigue. May those who find themselves in trackless, fearful wilderness, the children, the aged, the unprotected, those stupefied and the insane, be guarded by beneficent celestials. May beings be free from all states of no leisure and be endowed with faith, wisdom, and kindness. With food obtained in a proper manner and excellent conduct, may they be mindful throughout their lives. May all beings be without want for wealth, just like the treasury of space, and without it being the source of dispute or harm, may they always enjoy it as they wish. May those who have little splendor come to be endowed with majesty, and may those whose bodies are worn with toil find magnificent and noble forms. May all lower life forms in the universe take rebirth in higher forms. May the lowly obtain grandeur, and may the proud be humbled. By the merits I have accumulated, may every single being abandon all forms of evil and perpetually engage in virtue. May they never be parted from the awakening mind, and may they always engage in the Bodhisattva's conduct. May they be cared for by the Buddhas and relinquish the actions of devils. May sentient beings have lives inconceivably long when in fortunate realms. May they always live in contentment, unfamiliar with even the word death. May there abound in all directions gardens of wish-fulfilling trees filled with the sweet sound of Dharma proclaimed by the Buddhas and their sons. And may the land everywhere be pure, smooth and devoid of any rocks, level like the palm of the hand, and of the nature of lapis lazuli. For all the circles of disciples, For many bodhisattvas dwell in every land, adorning them in their excellent manifestations. May all embodied creatures uninterruptedly hear the sound of the Dharma issuing from birds and trees, beams of light, and even in space itself. May they always meet with Buddhas and their sons, the bodhisattvas. Then may these spiritual masters of the world be worshipped with endless, countless offerings, clouds of offerings. May celestials bring timely rains so that harvests may be bountiful. May kings act in accordance with Dharma and the people of the world always prosper. May all medicines be effective and the repeating of mantras be successful. May Darkin, cannibals, and the like be endowed with compassionate minds. May no living creature ever suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, or their minds ever be depressed. In all temples and monasteries, may reading and recitation flourish and remain. May the sanghas always be in harmony, and may their purposes be accomplished. May monks desiring to practice find quiet and solitary places, and through having abandoned all wandering thoughts, may they meditate with flexible minds. May nuns desiring to practice find quiet and solitary places, and through having abandoned all wandering thoughts, may they meditate with flexible minds. May nuns be material sufficient, abandon quarreling with each other, and be unharmed. Similarly, may all ordained ones never let their morality weaken. Having repented any moral falls, may evil always be eradicated, and thereby obtaining a happy state of birth, may spiritual conduct not decline even there. May the wise be honored, and may they receive alms. May their minds be completely pure, and may they be renowned in all directions. May beings not experience the misery of lower realms, and may they never know any hardships with a physical form superior to the gods. May they swiftly attain Buddhahood. May sentient beings again and again make offerings to all the Buddhas, and may they constantly be joyful with the inconceivable bliss of the Buddhas. Just as they intended, may the Bodhisattvas fulfill the welfare of the world, and may all sentient beings receive whatever the Buddhas have intended for them. Similarly, may the Prachika Buddhas and the Shravakas find happiness. And until I reach the level of the Joyous One, through the kindness of Manjughosha, may I be mindful throughout my lives and always obtain ordination. May I live and be sustained by simple common foods, and in all my lives may I find the ideal solitude for practicing Dharma. Whenever I wish to see something or even wish to ask the slightest question, may I behold without any hindrance the Lord Manjughosha himself, in order to fulfill the needs of beings who reach into the ends of space. May my way of life be just like that of Manjughosha. For as long as space endures, as long as living beings remain, until then, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May all the pains of living creatures ripen solely upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness. May the teachings, which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy, be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. So we see here right at the end of Shantideva's text, through the kindness of our teachers, I develop. I can develop through the kindness of the teachers like Khyongla Rato Rinpoche, Khyentse Geshe Wandak, all these great, great teachers who are no longer in our world, who touched our lives. So really, really, we were so benefited by them. Just so lucky to have had them and had their presence. So I want to thank all of you for creating the conditions for teachers to teach your students by going on, different teachers' YouTube sites, right? We're able to see different teachings and establish the cause and the reason for them to teach, and establish ourselves in a place to be developed by a teacher. So I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and let's close with our normal dedications. That's it. We'll do the concluding Thanksgiving mandala offering. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular the essential teachings of Venerable Dragpa, to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the Hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may quickly meet with Khyentse Geshe Wandak again, that he will continue to teach us until we become enlightened in whatever form he chooses to emanate, to come into our lives and help us. And pray that teachers like Khyongla Rato Rinpoche continue to emanate into our world, to be able to turn the light on, to dispel the darkness of our ignorance. So thank you, all of you, for coming, and we'll see you soon. Sunday, 10 a.m., Lam Rim teaching, reviewing the stages of the path according to Lama Tsongkhapa's own outline. And please remember to keep all suffering sentient beings in your thoughts, and remember that it's for all sentient beings who are suffering, because if one is a sentient being, they have afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience. So a bodhisattva sees obstructions to omniscience as suffering, because they want to become a Buddha so badly. They see it as an obstacle. So we look for even those forms of suffering to be removed when we think of removing sentient beings' suffering, and we think of wanting to become a Buddha for all sentient beings. We're thinking about sentient beings who are even that advanced. So thank you, all of you, and we'll see you next time, Sunday morning at 10 a.m., hopefully. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Thank you, Jeff.